welcome, guys. We're gonna start to talk about virtually everything that I think as a broker we kind of need to know as we're starting into the industry. And we're kind of in this really unique spot too, because the industry has really gotten a lot of shakeup in the last half year. So welcome, Jamie, because this is like the hardest time. But what's really cool about this time is that those brokers that started at the last one of these, so like 2008-ish, that it was a tough time to start as a broker because there was the Great Recession, and there was just a lot of stuff that was kind of working against us. The brokers that started then are the ones that typically are still around now. So the people that make it through this time are the ones that actually have longevity. So this is the best time to start. Honestly, it's challenging, but it's a really good time. So don't feel like you're at a disadvantage. I think this is actually a huge advantage. All right, so I have set this up as a roundtable discussion. So if you guys want to unmute and ask questions, that's cool. I do want this to be interactive, and I've got kind of a bit of a guideline and a bit of a outline as to what I want to get through today. So I'm going to try and do all of that and get through that stuff. But I do want you guys to have the ability to ask questions. So if anyone has a question, you can either just kind of start talking, or I think you can go, there's like a little raise hand button, or there's a reaction thing. You can go like that. Oh, there's a raise hand button. There it is. So
I'm just going to keep if you guys don't mind, I'm just going to keep my thing muted until I got to speak because I got kids home from school today. Really good times. Yeah.
That's fun. How come they're home?
Sick. Sniffles. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Classic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know the feeling. All right. Okay. So as you guys know, so Jamie, you probably won't know this, but I always like to break everything into threes because for me, 3 really makes sense, and 3 is enough that I can remember it. If Sue ever needs me to go to the grocery store, that's the most I can remember is 3 things. So that's kind of where I draw the line, is 3 things. So I figure if we just break everything to 3s, then it all makes sense. So I'm going to break this into at least 3 major sections. The first section I'm going to call technology. So technology, it can encompass everything from how we use our emails to the various bits and pieces that we have available to us, to your own computer and how you use it. So I'm not a computer expert, but I would call myself a geek. So yeah, Brent's like, what? No, I'm not, because I will never take responsibility for anyone's computer problems, but I can try to help. So if you guys do have computer questions, please feel free to ask. I work on both a Mac and PC, so I can kind of work between the two. So the first section is going to be technology. The second section, in general sense, is the mortgage completion process. So this is everything from getting clients to how to fill out forms, to coming to an agreement with clients, to kind of working through a CRM. That's kind of, to me, the mortgage completion process. And, I think from the perspective of a new broker, that is probably the process that is the most shrouded in mystery, because it doesn't get mentioned really in any sort of educational material that we have. It is just very like, I don't even know. Like, I don't even, what is a Form 10? I know we had a broker join us. It was about almost 4 years ago. And this particular broker had never seen a credit bureau after 6 months of working with another firm. And so again, this is part of that completion process. Like, we don't even know the stuff because no one ever teaches it to us. So I wanted to encompass that in that second section, that's the mortgage completion process. So we got technology, we got mortgage completion, and the third part, you're gonna have to excuse me. I had thought of it, and I have done all this. This is kind of all just me having put some notes down and starting to kind of get this process together. But I had it. Any questions so far? You guys talk while I think of what that third thing
Just a
is.
comment, Pete. I think your rule of 3 might have to get reduced to rule of 2
I
as you get a
know.
little bit older.
Damn it. 45 came quick. Rule of 2. Okay, so it's the rule of 2 now. Oh golly. No, oh my gosh, this is crazy. Okay, anyway, we're gonna start off, and I'm gonna get to the third one because I know it's gonna come to me. This is the benefit of kind of doing this in a small scale too, is that I can kind of refine this process as we go. Okay, so today I feel like, and like I mentioned before, I feel like we're in a time of a fairly big challenge. So we have probably some of the most difficult times in terms of rates. Like we've seen rates go up a lot. We've seen the price of houses go up a lot. So as brokers, that has kind of been the kind of overarching theme for the last 6 or so months, even 2022, if we call it that. So challenge. I'm always about cheesy things too. So in the word challenge is the word change. See, I told you this is going to be cheesy. But challenge, it's built in. So change is built into challenge. And I also thought of an acronym for change, but I won't get totally into that. So I want to challenge you guys to come up with, I'm going to put up a whiteboard here. Whiteboard, here we are. Okay, so you guys can all see the whiteboard now. So change, I want you guys to help me come up with the acronym because that's what we're doing today. I know this is maybe Lindsay, maybe this is all like you're into this because of the teaching background. No? Okay. Change, this is my thoughts on this were what is it that we can do to kind of help us achieve success during change? Because I feel like we've got this challenging time. We know we have to do something different. So what are the various different things that we can do to help us kind of make that change and provide for our success moving forward? This is that open table, round table time now. You guys can unmute.
So, Pete, I think if I'm going to pick a letter and pick C just to start, I would
Nice.
say, I would say client relations. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know how relevant that is when you're just starting out if you don't have a large database of clients or anything like that. But the clients that you do have and the people you have in your network, I think nurturing those people and reaching out to them and being in touch, being present in their lives in some capacity is important.
Absolutely. I think that is absolutely true. And this to me really comes back to, so the C that I had in my head was very similar to that. I had communication, because in order to kind of have those client relationships, you got to be communicating. And this comes to that mortgage completion process. So how do we actually get people into what we want? Not even what we want, but how do we get people into the process of knowing that we can help them through the mortgage application process? And to me, part of that is communicating. So for some people, they might say this is actually advertising, right? Like that, getting people to know who you are. But I think to me, advertising always comes back to, can you communicate to them? Do they know that you're the person to come to? Do they know that you're the expert? So yeah, so I'm going to put, I'll put communication in here as well. But one of the things that I really think is important to that whole idea of being the expert for people, being their touch point for questions of financial literacy and helping them with financing mortgages, is partly to kind of listen to what the industry says. We kind of look at that and we say, hey, this industry is really good because it teaches me about how to help my clients out. But I find that the industry is also very, very similar. Like everyone's going to read the same books. They're all going to send you the same books. All the brokers are going to read the same damn thing. So what I'm trying to say is I actually just threw the book. It would have been more effective if I threw it in the picture, but um, I think it's super important that we read the books, but it's also super important that we also kind of try to take our own tack on a lot of these things and say, well, how do we get people to know who I am? And you guys probably know from the bit of training that you've done with me that I'm always about trying to find who you are as a person. And Lindsay knows that I've kind of worked with her on trying to kind of really see who the real Lindsay is. And if people were to turn around and say, who's me? Like, I'm kind of a sporty guy and I'm a geek and I'm a detailsy person. But to me, that like all my people know that that's me. I'm just trying to figure out how we can make you guys you. Brent.
So I think touching on your point, Pete, about everybody reads the same books, and then what do you do with the information in the books and how you do it differently? A great example for me is if you read Be the Better Broker, which a lot of people do when they get into the industry. Pete has a copy right beside him. I have one on my desk. Well, I had one on my desk when it existed. But in there, he talks about find your niche of clients. And so Pete and I talked about this almost 2 years ago now, Pete. And at the time, I brought that idea up to him, and Pete said something pretty, it stuck with me, is okay, your niche should be closing files. It's not finding, you don't have to be the guy that everybody goes to for rentals or the guy that everybody goes to for refinances or anything like that. At the start, it's got to be closing files. But that's where you take the information that's out there in these books and everything else that, like Pete says, everybody reads, and just what do you do with it? How do you make this your own? What's your own interpretation of it all? So I just wanted to touch on that, Pete. That was a great point.
Thank you. And this really isn't meant to be a pump up Pete thing, because I don't need to be pumped up. And I love that you've brought it up. I often so my background was I did my degree in commerce. I love economics. I love houses. I love all that stuff. And I love learning all about it. I worked in accounting. I worked in insurance. And I worked in lending. So I kind of have all these various bits and pieces that I can kind of hope to share with you guys that sometimes they make sense and sometimes they don't. But I like to kind of spew out a lot of info because some of it sticks, and some stuff that's stuck with Brent maybe has not stuck with others. So absolutely, I just want to give you guys as many tools as you can have to help make your journey through mortgage brokering successful. So I'm going to go back to that screen, our whiteboard, and see if anyone else wants to kind of take a guess, or even give me something that you think is going to help move ourselves forward as individuals through this change. You got 5 letters left, so I mean, still lots to choose from. Go for it.
I'm going to go with honesty.
Ooh.
I think being honest with our clients at this point, because what may have been realistic for them, 6 months ago, isn't realistic for them anymore.
Yes.
They may have had these grand plans at one point, and at one point they were very doable. But as the market shifted, and we've seen the changes to rates, we've seen the changes to qualifying. I think that we need to be very honest with our clients about where things are at. And honest with people when they call us to have that initial conversation. If somebody calls you and they say they make $50,000 a year and they want to buy something for $700,000 and they have 20 grand worth of consumer debt, I mean, you have to be honest with them about what their situation is and try to find ways that you can help address their immediate situation to put them in a position that they can buy, or that they can be in a position to achieve their goal. But I think it all starts with being honest and building that trust with the client. A client's never going to stick with you if they feel like you're just blowing smoke right from the beginning. So just be upfront and honest with everybody you come in contact with about their situation.
What do you guys think of that? Brutal honesty. It's such a weird thing, but it's a very, very good point in that in our industry, sometimes you have to be brutally honest. I remember one of Deb's favorite stories, and she may have said this on one of our meetings. You may not have ever heard it, but I remember one of the clients that Deb had that came into her did the application. She could see that there was a lot of debt existing. She could see that there was late payments on the credit bureau, and the clients really, this was a very, very pushy client who was really trying to get a whole bunch of stuff done and was really pushing Deb to get this refinance done so they could buy another place. And there was a point at which they were just kind of constantly calling Deb and trying to find out where the application was at. And there was a point at which Deb said, I wish she was here because she'd tell the story much better than me, but the clients were basically like, why can't we get an answer to this? And she's like, why haven't you made your monthly payments? That's what's really caused everything to be really difficult. And the client was like, you're right. Actually, that is part of the reason that this. So that brutal honesty was the thing that kind of got them to finally flip and say, oh, you know what? I was probably asking for too much, or that they were trying to push too hard, because sometimes people just need to hear that the situation's not right. And we will encounter this type of scenario more and more, I think now, especially as rates have kind of risen and we're kind of coming out of this crazy low rate environment to a more normal rate environment. We still think it's a higher rate environment, but it's a bit more normal. If we go back 20 years, this is kind of where rates are more typically at versus where they were for the last 10 to 12 years. So brutal honesty is probably a really good thing. Do you guys have any other thoughts on honesty?
I don't think it's necessarily just brutal honesty, but I also think it's setting expectations. I mean, that's right from the start. That's one of the main things we should be doing with our clients is set your expectation level for them. So that way they don't think that you can deliver the moon and you really can't.
So I was gonna wait till someone else had kind of hit the E. I think that's a really good E though. So I'm gonna put it up. You guys are gonna have to get in on this because Brent's gonna hog this whole.
I'm gonna stop at this point.
I would say for me, ask questions. Like Brent's been great for me because I've had so many dumb questions that I probably should have known the answer to, but that I may not have wanted to ask you, Pete.
Right.
But yeah, and even with some of the lenders that I've dealt with too, they've been really great about asking tons of questions.
I don't think that ever stops though. Like, no, honestly, Lindsay, like I think that throughout the course of everybody's career, you're going to continually have questions or new scenarios or something you've never seen before or anything like that. And then that's where I think that we have some really good resources in place. Like we have a Pete we can go to. We have a whole group of people that are willing to help each other out.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I think ask questions is such a neat one because not only is it relating to how we work together as mortgage brokers, but it's also in how we work with our clients. Like Sue knows this about me, and you guys probably know this about me, but when I have a client meeting, like if I'm meeting with a new client, I first will typically go through who I am, introduce myself so we can develop a little bit of rapport. But after that initial part, I basically tell the clients, I'm going to ask you a lot of very probing questions, and I'm probably going to fly at it maybe a little bit too hard because I'm going to just constantly, I hear the answer to one question and it takes me to the next question. So I'm very much like question focused when it comes to dealing with clients. So I think the ask questions is also very important when it comes to the client experience and how we deal with clients, because one of the things that we have to do is we have to understand that client scenario well enough that we can actually properly convey what's going on. And I have seen the brokers that have a little bit harder time asking those questions will tend to have more difficulty getting an approval because they don't tend to have the right story. And that is, again, it's one of those things about honesty, about being kind of brutally like, I'm going to be in your face and I'm going to be honest with my clients. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. And a lot of these, your parents may not have ever had to hear. But in the lending environment that we have today, I got to ask these questions. And so we start to kind of hammer home with, what is your, your current job? How does that look? Are you guaranteed hours? Like, so we ask a ton of questions that will eventually form the story that we portray to the lender, and that the lender can then say, yes, I like this client. This is our type of client.
Peter, I have a good example of that.
Yeah.
Just from a recent file is, I had clients on their bureau, they had a 14,000 debt to GMC, and part of the plan for their approval was they had to pay it out from the sale of their existing property and some other things like that. And it was one of those things that I kind of glossed over, but something was nagging me in the back of my mind because they mentioned they had a car lease. So that $14,000 for them to actually pay that out, it was about 32 grand was the actual lease buyout if they had to do it. So if I wouldn't have followed up on that, that would have turned around, that would have sank the file, no question about it. Right. So it's one of those things where it's so important to ask every question that's out there. And even when something seems like it may be straightforward, it's not necessarily straightforward. So I don't think we ever stop asking questions of clients. Dig as deep as you have to get the answers to everything. Really.
Yes.
I mean, that's what it is, to get the answers to everything that's out there.
Yeah. And oftentimes that can be a little bit uncomfortable from our side, because we're like, well, if I ask one question, is it going to lead me down a rabbit hole? And sometimes it will, but that's the important thing, is that we actually know the real story. We need to know the rabbit hole, because if we don't and we make assumptions about things, assumptions are probably the worst thing. And I'd say that if we were to have another A on your A, that we could say ask questions / assumptions, like don't make them, because you're never going to win by making any assumptions. And this is why I'm actually going to put assumptions in the other side of that A, because I think it is a really good other side of the coin to ask questions.
Absolutely. And I think just to finish that story, we got lucky because of the time we're in right now. There's a vehicle shortage. And so they actually went to a dealership, and the dealer paid them to take the lease and paid out the lease. Nice. So it worked out fine. But again, it was one of those scenarios that, it could have been a real big issue down the road. So,
yep. How interesting. Wait, so I'm going to write that down. Dean and Jamie, you guys have 2 letters left here. I'm going to put this screen up here. I'm going to ask you guys, whoever wants to fire away.
I've got an idea for one, and I don't know if it's going to be worded or if it's going to come out the same way I'm thinking about it. But for G, I'm going to say go. And it's kind of in a broad sense, because I find, at least for me, I can think about calling somebody for a reason. Let's just say it's a new potential client or something, and I'll think of this scenario, I'll think of another scenario, and all of a sudden it's like an hour, a couple hours later, and I haven't really done anything. I think it's helpful in that case, but also
like that.
Like what?
Like that with an exclamation point?
Yes, exactly. But also in cases like if you're thinking of putting together like a little marketing plan, and you have some thoughts that you want to do, just do it now, because especially I've noticed the last 5 years, maybe even 10 years, if I hesitate on something for a little bit, all of a sudden it's a year later and I still haven't done it. So sometimes you just have to get the ball running and just go. So
Dean, is that because you're overthinking it, or is that what kind of causes you not to follow through on that if you don't do it immediately?
It's not that I don't follow through. I think it's just that sometimes I get caught up in my own head about different things that might come up, and I want to solve those problems when it isn't even really a problem that ends up coming up.
Paralysis by analysis.
Yeah. Yep, that's a good one.
I've never heard that, but it's very true.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good. I do like that, the concept of just do it now. I don't know. I always have, I think of Yoda when I think of the most important, one of the most important philosophies I have in my life, which is do or do not. There is no try. My mom, so for the life of me, my mom was saying something about I'll try. And I was like, Mom, I'm going to tell you, I've got one philosophy that I take from Yoda, which is do or do not. There is no try. And that's very similar to go. It's like, you just got to do it. There's no kind of half-assing it. You just have to say, I'm going to do this. So go.
Yeah. And I don't mean like jump in completely blind. Like, we're professionals. You should do a basic level of research or background search, but just still get it done.
Yes.
I think a lot of that for a lot of people in their first, especially when they first start out, a lot of that's based in fear. I mean, because it's a little bit of imposter syndrome where, yes, we're a licensed mortgage broker when you first start, but you also feel like you don't know what you're talking about. When in reality, you know more than the general public, for sure. And so I think a lot of people, they get kind of that fear block where they don't jump into those things and they don't do those things because they're afraid of, basically making a mistake and not seeming like the professional they feel like they should be and that type of thing. But I think you're absolutely right. Just dive in.
Exactly. Lindsay, what do you think of the Go?
That's me. It's totally fear-based. Like, I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to screw up. I don't want to say the wrong thing or not know the answer when they ask me a question. And so I feel like I have to have my script written right out and everything's got to be totally perfect before I do anything. But that holds me back for sure.
I want to show you a really good example. I had 3 thoughts in my head starting this presentation and I can't even remember the third one.
That's right.
Yeah. As Brent has been talking, I've been like, I'm writing this down, trying to think of that third thing. It still hasn't come to me. And it was such a good, anyway, I obviously hadn't hashed it out enough to go through this, but at the same time, I wanted to get these sessions going because I think even if we start talking about something, it's better because it allows us to, I mean, even just this, we've got 5 letters out of the word change, out of my word challenge. And it's already brought some really good ideas, which I absolutely love. And I know I'm super cheesy, but I love it too. So, so Jamie, you're left. I mean, you got the N.
I literally am going to need help on this. I have
Okay.
no idea.
Okay, so let's
I want to
break-
blame it on my previous course and that my brain's not that spongy, but I literally have been sitting here thinking of N words and nothing.
Yeah. Well, and that's such. As soon as I had the letter N, I was like, oh, it's going to be like N word. But anyway, this is going to be. So let's think about that whole like kind of the idea of technology. We've got stuff that helps us. We want to be unique. We've got a bunch of stuff that we kind of need to do during the process. I think, like, to me, this is again where I'm going to bend the rules a little bit. I'm going to say, what makes you, Jamie? It's not an N word, but it's an I word, and it starts with IN.
Individuality.
Exactly. Which I'm going to say is like individuality. See how I'm bending the rules?
Individuality. I get it.
Individuality. I'm always about, I don't know. I find that if your mind can kind of, I know this is going to sound super weird, but there's kind of structure that we have in our industry. So we have to, like, we know that the maximum debt service ratio is at 39-44. Like, that's the maximum they can be. Sometimes they're 35-42, but we know that there's structure. I think one of the coolest things that we can do as brokers is we can start to break down some of that structure and start to think a little bit more freely. Like, take your head completely outside the box. And to me, this is why I like to me, by saying individual, I'm going outside of where our structures are. We know that this is not an N word, it's an I word, but I want you guys to take this yourselves outside of the normal structure and say, you know what, that's fun. Because when we see files, you're going to see files that you're like, this does not meet the 39-44 debt servicing rules. So I'm out. See you guys. And you're losing a big chunk of business because those files are the ones where clients absolutely love you if you can get it done. And sometimes we have to do that on an alternative file, or sometimes we have to do it on a private lending file. But those clients stay with you forever because they're like, Jamie did this. She's the coolest individual that I've ever met. She got us there. And then they follow you from private to alternative to prime lending. and you'll never lose this client, and they'll refer you to everyone. So I think the concept of being an individual is really, it not only is it kind of like thinking outside the box, it's knowing who you are, but it's really just expanding on that whole idea of, hey, this is me as a person. And I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier when I said I know who my clients are. They know who I am. Again, I'm cheesy, I'm a geek, I'm all that stuff, but that's, you know, that's me. It's, if I try to be too serious or whatever, that it's like, I don't want to deal with that. That's not who I am. So it's okay to be whoever you are. And I know, Lindsay, I'm going to point you out, but I think we've kind of, Lindsay and I worked together for a year, and we're getting to the point now where she's really like, not only has Lindsay kind of developed a neat kind of understanding of the industry at this point, but now she's going out and actually visiting referral partners. And I think that's so cool, because I would think that maybe maybe a number of months ago when we first kind of started chatting about this, it was a very, a difficult thing. And even, I mean, for most people,
Yes.
going out to talk to new people is very difficult. So I think
Sounds
that's
terrifying.
a huge compliment to
It
you.
was terrifying. Yes.
but in part of it was kind of getting some knowledge base. You don't have to know everything though. But the other part is just knowing who Lindsay is, and knowing that it's okay to kind of have your own faults and kind of say, hey, I don't think I know the answer to that question. I'll come back to you. And knowing the right way to kind of move that forward, because people respect that way more than just saying you always have the right answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is good. I think this is a really good start. And what I wanted this part of the discussion to focus on is kind of about where we are in the mortgage industry right now. So it's kind of giving you a little bit of a basis on where to form. I want you guys to take that concept of change, and I'm going to send this whiteboard out to all of you, and just really kind of try to identify within yourselves. So this is my homework for you guys for next week, is identify within yourself all those various bits and pieces. So again, I'll share the screen so you guys can see it, but identify how it is that you want to communicate and have client relations. Do you want to be phoning people? So if you guys listen to any of the Dominion Lending Center's calls, you'll see that there's a lot of similarity in what people say. So like if you listen to Gary, he'll say, be picking up the phone, talking to people. If you listen to Eddie, pick up the phone, talk to people, now's the time. It's funny, they're very, all the personalities within DLC are very similar. So they'll kind of all say the one thing. And I find that a lot of brokers will just kind of say, hey, they're telling me to phone, so I'm going to phone. Do that, but also try to figure out your own thing. So if I was in the other room, I'd be able to pull this out for you guys. But I have an old 1920s typewriter that I actually type letters to clients on. And it's the funniest thing. And the letters are super short because I cannot type a long letter because it takes me forever. But I think it's something unique, and I don't know if anyone even appreciates it. They may not even open the mail, so I might just feel good myself. But I just think it's something that's different, that, hey, maybe someone's going to open it and be like, oh, this is cool. This is better than an email. But like, find your thing. Like I'm a techno geek, so I love anything that's absolutely brand new or happening tomorrow. But I like super old things. So like this typewriter, I know its history. It's Canadian. It's from the early 1920s. It's just really cool, and I usually mention that in my letters to clients. So that's how I like to communicate. But I also phone a lot of people, so I like that whole thing. But if you want, you could also be the type of person that sends regular email communications. And you could create these really cool emails that are maybe, maybe you put in this week's baking tip or whatever, right? Like, I don't even know. And I don't know what all the possibilities are of communication, because everyone can be so different. Dean, for instance, I know we chatted a little while ago. Dean does woodwork, and he was going to kind of mix in the woodwork part with his mortgage communications. So he does some fantastic woodwork. Again, I just think if you've got something that you love to do, see if you can kind of put that in with what you do as a broker, because there's always time for synergy. There's always a place for those things to kind of combine and create something that most people will be like, that's kind of cool. So figure out your communication. So again, first thing is, this is what you're going to work on. What are your strategies for client relations, and what are your communication strategies? Two, this one's probably going to be self-explanatory. Probably don't need to do anything on this, but honesty, just really almost, you know, in the case of honesty, make an agreement with yourself that it's okay for you to be honest with clients. Because for a lot of us, we think that it's not something that clients want to hear. And I'll tell you right now, and Brent, I see Brent nodding, you have to make this agreement with yourself that it's okay to be honest with clients. You have to tell them the real straight up goods.
So Pete, I'll give a good example of that. And, you know, the very first client I ever dealt with, he was a Skip the Dishes driver / realtor. Pete, you must remember him.
I don't want to say what I said when you heard when Brent told me skip the dishes.
We can't, just because the acronym is a little, you guys can figure out the acronym of skip the dishes yourself. Anyways, this guy, his situation was a complete mess, but I was naive, and, you know, I didn't know what I didn't know at that time. So I thought there might be a solution out there. And realistically, as somebody, I should have just stopped, you know, right at the start. And because I didn't, it went on and on for months. Like, he sent me a text. He sent me a text, like, I'd say a year ago now, but it went on forever. And it was just a time drain. It was so exhausting dealing with him. But again, if right from the start, I was just honest with him and gave him that brutal honesty, like, listen, there's no chance we can do anything right now, then it would have been a non-issue and he would have moved on. But instead, it dragged on and on and on. And that's because at the time, you know, I wasn't confident enough in myself to be brutally honest with him and say, hey, like, cut the tie right now type thing. So it is something, it does take a little bit of time to get comfortable with that. But when you do, you'll feel a lot better about everything, because, you know, your clients will appreciate it, and you'll appreciate how your business goes from there. That's for sure.
Awesome. Yes, I do remember the story. And I know that starting at one's career, there's always the files that come to you early in your career that you're like, there's a solution. I gotta be able to do this. And there's times that you kind of have to say, I don't think we can. I don't think there's a solution. And that's where, for us as a team, having these kind of meetings and having that honest ability to communicate with the group, to ask them questions, to kind of rely on their knowledge base, try to figure stuff out. And if as a group we say, you know what, I don't think it's going to work, then having that honesty to say to the client, here's some steps that you can take to get to the point that we can do something. Always provide something that allows them a step forward, but be honest with them in the short term and say, look, at this point, there's nothing. So yeah, really good point. And while you were talking, I remember the third thing, but I won't tell you until later. You got to hang out to the end of the video.
The other thing about that, as you're talking, just the individuality thing. I think that as you go, I mean, if you're not comfortable on the phone, you're not comfortable making cold calls to people and that type of thing, it's going to come off that way. Like, and it's going to project through the phone to whoever you're talking to. So if you're not comfortable with it, then, you know, to me, that's something you don't do. That's an activity that you don't actively participate in. I mean, yes, we all have to make some calls here and there, no question. But I think that if you just follow exactly what's told by, you know, 90% of the brokers in the world that pick up the phone, call 20 realtors today, call 20 realtors tomorrow, call 20, you know, whatever the advice that's out there is, it's not going to come off as genuine. And that's where it's so important to be individual and know yourself. Like, use the forms of communication that you like, you know, reach out to people how you like to reach out to people, stuff that you're comfortable with, because then you're actually going to be able to connect with people a lot better. You know, for me, I hate the phone. I mean, I really do. I mean, when I'm talking to a client, I don't hate it. I mean, that's no problem at all, talking to somebody, and I'll talk to somebody for hours if I have to. That's totally fine. But I hate making cold calls, so I don't do them. Like, I don't, because it's not my thing. And I know that's not a genuine thing. So if I'm calling, you know, some random realtor for no reason other than to, you know, try to become a referral partner of some sort, that's not going to work for me. it's not going to work for them because I'm not genuinely myself. So you're going to find your own thing that makes it comfortable for you. And, when you're comfortable, you're going to be a lot better at what you're doing. You're going to feel a lot better about what you're doing.
Totally agree. And I think it was really good that you cued me back to just be yourself, because that is that whole part of being an individual. Is like, you got to be you. You guys will all know this, and I do a lot of talking during our videos, so much so that I tend not to even let people answer the question that I've just asked. But that's my comfort zone. Like, I'm happy picking up my phone, and I love talking to people. It's what I love to do. There's very few times that you won't find me talking to people because I just enjoy it. But you might not be that person. And like Brent, you might be a person that loves to communicate with email or through other communication methods that just give you more solidity or whatever. That's totally fine. The beauty of this industry, and this is the most important thing that I want to kind of instill upon you guys, is that there's a lot of business out there and you don't have to do it all. So the reason I kind of talk about communication is because if there's a client that wants to be talking to a guy that loves to be on the phone, they'll find the person that loves to be on the phone. It doesn't have to be you. So if for whatever reason you don't mesh with someone, it's okay. There's lots of business. And even though right now, again, is a challenging time, we have to remember that often we will be a lot more efficient. So we do more with less time by just naturally going to the clients that want to work with us. So with Brent, he's working with people that are texting and that are emailing. That's phenomenal. For other people,
communication with people.
Yes. And for Deb, she does not want to deal with texts. No text messages. She is no text. She wants people sitting in the chair in front of her. So there's all sorts of clients out there. And just remember that those people will naturally attract themselves to you. You just have to kind of determine what your strategy and what your style is. So again, I'm going to share the screen, but we've kind of gone through most of them. So honesty, again, making that the agreement with yourself. Again, the asking questions and not making assumptions, that again is one of those things that I want you to really kind of just remember and just to keep in mind that as we go through the mortgage completion process, to always remember to ask the questions. And again, being an individual, this is very easy. This is going to be something that you just have to convince yourself it's okay to be me. I love Dean's thing about go and do it now. Like, seriously, this is the thing that always holds us back. I'm so guilty of this because I do this constantly with our CRM. I hate the CRM and I don't know what it is. I do know what it is. It's that I feel like it's a black box that everything goes into and I don't know what comes out. It's like a black hole. I don't know how CRMs work. There's just too much stuff that's going into them that I don't know how it's coming out. So to me, I don't do the go on the CRM. That's my thing, but I should. So I guess I got to hold myself to this. By the end of October, I'm going to have set up campaigns on our own CRM. So there's my guarantee to you guys. I'm going to do this. And lastly is expectations. So not only setting expectations with our clients, but also kind of ensuring that we can meet those expectations. So I want you guys to take this time for this homework to figure out what your expectation is of you as a broker. So if I say to myself, okay, when I get a new client, I want to phone them back because I'm a phoner. I want to phone them back within 4 hours, right? Figure out what your expectations are of yourself so that at least you have a benchmark. Because if we never say, and we never take the time to figure out what is our expectation of a broker and what is the expectation of me specifically as my own broker, then there's never a deadline, right? There's never a kind of, here's the time that I have to hit. Now is a good time because we have a lot of time to kind of think about this. Think about what it is that your expectation is. So again, go through your thoughts about the process and say, okay, if I contact a client, how soon am I getting back to them? What is my expectation of myself in terms of follow-up? So all the various touch points, figure out what your timelines are and what your expectations are, and take the time to figure out what is your expectation of the best client that you could have. Who do you want that person to be? Do you want that person to be someone who you meet with, or do you want that person to be someone who's just really responsive to emails? Figure out what you expect of that client, because then you're going to figure out who your client is. And that's really important as well, because if we don't know, oh, I made a mistake there. Here, I'm going to go back. Yeah, there we go. If we don't know who our best client is, then it's hard for us to kind of attract that particular client. Okay. So I'm going to send this to you afterwards. Like I said, I'm going to send you guys that whiteboard. They do save nicely, so this is cool. So we talked about this was part of the mortgage completion process. And for a lot of us, and I think for a lot of these training sessions, this is going to be a lot about the mortgage completion process. It's going to be a little bit more free flowing, but it's more like practical. Here's what it takes to be a broker. Technology side, that's going to be, there's going to be a little bit about computers. I'm going to touch base today a little bit on something that Dominion Lending Centers just recently emailed out. So I'm going to go to that one right here on my screen. There. Okay. So you guys probably, I'm going to scroll up here. You guys probably saw an email just a little while ago. I don't know if you got it, Jamie. I think I might have forwarded it to you. Yeah. Okay. So you'll have seen, this was just last week. Kate from DLC head office sent out this broker orientation guide. This is a really good kind of all-encompassing, very nicely laid out pictures, font. It's beautiful. I think Kate has done absolute wonders when it comes to the branding side and the kind of cleanliness of DLC stuff, because this did not exist 12 years ago. Like 12 years ago, you're just kind of like feeling your way through. There was no nothing. It was really very, very basic. So this is lovely in that in here, and this is again, part of technology gives us access to a lot of this stuff online, but you'll see that this is a PDF document, but it references a lot of stuff that has to do with technology. So in here, it talks about getting started. There's Eddie, talks about the mission and vision and values and who is DLC Group. And then there talks about that they're here to support you. But this part here, this is what I think is really critical. So the intranet, this is the part that, Jamie, you'll have just received access to this intranet. Yep. So you'll see that this is kind of broken down into a number of different sections that it talks about here on this resource guide, breaks down kind of the various parts and pieces. But I want you to go through this this orientation guide just to kind of give you a sense of the various parts and pieces that are available within Dominion Lending Centers, because there's a lot of tools. And over the coming weeks, we're going to go through a lot of the various tools and the bits and pieces. But I just wanted to share with you this main guide that kind of helps you through, because the thing that I find that is the most consistent about this industry is that there is no straight line to the finish line. Everything is different and is different every time. And so while one new broker might need some help with marketing, another broker might need help with goal setting. And it's so hard for me to figure out exactly where anyone is. So I find that the best thing that I can do is to give you guys the resources so that you have in front of you everything that you need to know in terms of getting to that thing that you're looking for more information on. So in this case, this orientation guide, this manual, is really a nice way to kind of learn to see where all the various bits and pieces are. Going directly to the DLC intranet is not always the most easy to navigate thing, because there's a lot of stuff that's hidden. So like a lot of computer systems, you might have a very basic menu that you kind of have to click on the little down arrow to actually get it to expand and to give you more information. That little menu might not even tell you exactly what's all hidden behind there. And so to me, this guide kind of expands upon the various bits and pieces that are in the DLC intranet. And again, even if you look at this part, this training, like it's got stuff in here where it talks about the training that's available online. And you can go online and find this training, but it's almost like you have to have a map in order to figure out how to navigate there. And this kind of gives you a little bit of that map. So again, support, services, etc. Feel free to read through this guide. Again, I'm going to take it back up to the top. So this is the broker orientation guide. If you don't have this, let me know, but it is there. So that's the technology piece for today. So review that guide and just kind of get the sense of where various bits and pieces are. Okay, I did promise you that I remember the third thing, and thank you, Brett, for speaking so much because it helped me out. Okay, so so third thing, and I thought this was kind of like the lead off into new broker training versus our whole team training, is in a lot of the team training, I'll have a lender come in, and the lender will kind of do usually high level product overview or sometimes very specific product stuff. But I thought one of the cool things that we could do during our meetings as new brokers is we can talk about the various bits and pieces of lenders and where they might fit. So again, very high overview today, because this is kind of the first part. So again, 3 parts: technology, mortgage completion process, and lenders. So lender relations. So in terms of lender relations, again, this is me and my 3 things. I like to break lenders into 3 parts. And there might actually be more than 3 parts, but I find that 3 is good. So there's prime lenders. That's Toronto Dominion Bank, Scotiabank. There's a few other kind of non-tier 1 banks that kind of call themselves banks, but we'll leave it at those 2 are the main 2 banks. And then we have our monoline lenders. So we have our CMLS, our First National Financial. We have Merix and Lendwise. We have RFA. We have RMG. So that kind of gives you the kind of basic rundown. And then we have credit unions, which include Valley First, also called Envision. And we have Vantage One, we have Interior Savings. So we've got a few credit unions that also work. So those all kind of get encompassed within that prime lending section. And so prime lending is typically, we look at verified income. So we know exactly what the person's income is. We're looking at a lot of checks and balances. So we're meeting those debt servicing guidelines that are typically very much in the box. This is for easy to verify income, stuff where people qualify. Usually it's just very clean cut. I call them like AAA type deals. That's what prime lending is. Best rates, usually fairly easy to work with. What I want to do as well with this lender section is I want to kind of give you the flip side of that, which is that prime lending is the most competitive part of the market. And by competitive, I don't just mean that that you're going to get the best rates. I also mean that this is the part of the market that is kind of the easy pickings. So this is the stuff that their current bank is already maybe going to be in touch with. This is the part where someone is going to look online and look at Rate Hub or any one of the other rate shopping sites. And they'll say, well, this person says that I can get this rate that's like 0.5% less than what the going rate is. So be very conscious that when it comes to prime lending, there is a lot of competition and perhaps a little bit of rate shopping that happens there. So just know that oftentimes, and again, this comes back to that whole asking questions and being honest. I would often ask for when I'm talking to a prime lending client, whether they already have asked their bank if they can get a mortgage. And that sounds really weird. But again, I'm trying to head off doing a whole bunch of work for no reward because we only get paid if the mortgage funds. So If we don't ask the question, have you already talked to your bank about this? Then we might be doing a whole bunch of work and the client's just going to go back to their bank and say, hey, can you match this? So I want to avoid that whole thing. Yeah, Brent.
On the competitive side of that, Pete, I think that another thing to note about your, let's call them your prime clients or A clients, is every broker wants those easy pickings. I mean, that's the file that, you know, if you guide it properly, will get through, it'll complete. We know that. So there is a lot of competition out there for those clients. Whereas I think you're about to touch into the B world. Those are the files that are uglier and a little bit more messy and don't pay as much. But at the end of the day, like Pete said before, the clients will stick with you for the rest of your life type thing. So the competition isn't just within the banks themselves and, you know, their own bank versus what you can offer them, that type of thing. It's within the brokers as well. I mean, it's a very competitive space in our market.
And this again, you know, it comes back really nicely to being an individual, because the thing that we kind of compete with, not only with the person's bank, but with other brokers, is oftentimes, and I'm going to go back to an analogy, or I guess an anecdote that happened to me early in my banking career. And before I worked at CIBC, I worked at a subsidiary of CIBC, which was PC Financial. Still exists, is in Superstore, the craziest little bank, but it was an entry into the banking world. And I had a really good supervisor when I was working there. And one of the things he said to me was, people don't come to you because we have the lowest rate. Because PC Financial had a really low rate for like anything lending wise, and they had pretty good rates for savings. But he said that the people that come to you and that they trust you with their stuff are going to come to you because of you. They always come to you because of you. And so when we're talking about these competitive situations, this is where that whole thing about being an individual really helps. If you've kind of created these expectations, you say, hey, here's my standard. I'm going to get back to you here. 2 hours, 4 hours, whatever you set as your standard. And you're going to say, this is how I'm going to communicate with you. This is what my standard is for follow-up day after day after day. If people know what that expectation is, you could have the same rate across the street at the bank, but they're going to come back to you because you're the one that they want to deal with. And we often know that when we go to a bank, we might see different employees there week after week. It's not the most stable environment. And unfortunately, banks aren't great at retaining employees because they don't tend to pay that much. And I know that because I used to work at one. So we know that we've got an advantage by being us. And even broker to broker, when it comes to competitive situations, a lot of times people will go to the person that they like the most. They're going to go to the person that either has set an expectation and has lived up to it, or they just like. They're like, hey, this guy's really funny, or this guy's really smart. Whatever it is, that person will be attracted to that broker.
Yeah, and that's where I think that it's so important that when you're connecting with people, you're genuinely connecting with people. And I mean, if I have a genuine connection with Pete, I'm going to continually want to deal with Pete because I just genuinely like dealing with Pete, right? And it doesn't matter if, like Pete says, maybe Lindsay could get me, a rate that's, 0.05% better. But if I enjoy dealing with Pete, why would I want to go deal with Lindsay? No offense, Lindsay. I love you too. But yeah, like to me, that's where that genuine connection comes in when you're dealing with your clients, and the client relation side of it is just be yourself and be who you are. They'll appreciate it so much more. I mean, it's just part of this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked a little bit about the prime lenders. I'll quickly go through the other two parts, and then I'll open this up to any questions, and then we can wrap up today's session. So the other two lending areas or lender kind of groups, the next one in terms of I would say like in terms of difficulty of file. So like prime files are pretty easy. They're kind of low bar because everything's very, very simple on them. The next level up in terms of difficulty is alternative lenders. So that's typically where we have a client who has some sort of unique scenario. This could be and this is where a lot of clients fall who are business owners. They may do a ton of business, so they may have a very high revenue level, but they write off a lot of expenses, and so their actual net income is fairly low. Those are very like absolutely perfect clients for alternative lenders, because a lot of alternative lenders will look at these files and they'll allow for what's called a stated income product. I'm going to go through that a little bit in more detail later, but know that it's a way of us looking at bank deposits and estimating expenses to arrive at a net income rather than the actual net income. It's kind of a made up number that the lender deems to be acceptable. Kind of weird, kind of strange space, but know that this actually happens and lenders are okay with this. So that's one type of alternative type client. Another alternative type client would be one that has some sort of credit damage, so credit bruised, credit possibly maybe even a consumer proposal, maybe even a bankruptcy. These are types of clients that might be looking at alternative lenders. Sometimes the actual property might be unique, but I find that that's pretty rare. It's mostly that there's a unique income or unique credit scenario with a client, and that's kind of where those fall. And then lastly, so that's the kind of second group of lenders. And then the third group of lenders when it comes to, again, difficulty is private lenders. So private lenders are ones in which the private lender is not operating under the Bank Act. So they don't operate under these set guidelines for debt servicing. Private lending is pretty much the Wild West. So they don't care about income necessarily. They don't care about credit necessarily. And they may not care about the property necessarily, but they won't do all three. So you can typically have one kind of weird thing with a private lender, maybe two, but as soon as we kind of get into a really ugly scenario, then most private lenders will be out as well. So private lending is where things are just really strange. We're not worried too much about the client being able to debt service, but we can't have too many negatives on the file. And that's kind of where that is. Brent, I think you got something to say.
It's funny because I have such a weird one from a few months ago where the private passed, but a B lender took it. It was just such a strange, that was that Lake Okanagan Resort property, which Lake Okanagan Resort has its own
weird
set of issues. But yeah, but a private passed on it because they'd never lent there before. They weren't comfortable with it. Whereas the B lender, I don't know why they accepted it, but they did. So, and
this is where things are really unique. Like if we go back to alternative lenders. So that's sometimes we'll call that a B lender. So alternative lenders typically will look at client deficiency and income deficiency, but they'll want a property that is in a fairly large urban area. So Vernon, Kelowna, as soon as we get to like even Salmon Arm, things start to get really difficult. Usually alternative lenders. So this is where this is interesting because Lake Okanagan Resort, it falls within the city of Kelowna, which is really weird because it's like way out on the other side of the lake. But it's got some really funky stuff with the property. There's really weird deals going on there.
Changing and the zoning's changing in 2 years. It's got a land use agreement on it, all sorts of stuff. It's weird, just weird.
So I could see why a private lender wouldn't even want to do it, but then it's weird that it got taken by a B lender. But again, this is where knowing and maybe even talking with the group really helps to kind of hash out ideas, because a lot of times you just don't know. Yeah. So prime lending fits in the box. Alternative lending is where it kind of doesn't really fit in the box, but maybe. And then private lending is where it's completely outside the box. And something is very strange about the file. And again, by rate, prime lending rates are typically the lowest. Alternative lender rates are actually just a little bit higher. They're actually not that far off of an A lender. Private lending is going to be a lot higher. So I usually say private lending is about double. So if we're looking at about 4 to 5%, I guess we're calling about 5% now on the prime side. Private's going to be about 10. Just so you guys can kind of see what the differences are. So we'll get into more lender stuff as time goes on. And I'm going to try to hit on each one of these three. So we'll talk about a little bit about technology. We'll go through a little bit about mortgage completion process, and we'll talk a bit about lender relations as we go through these various sessions. We'll do one every week, and we'll kind of go through.